The cell was cold. Una Park sat on the metal floor with her back against the wall. She had been a prisoner for 12 days now. At least, she thought it was 12 days. It was hard to tell time on an alien ship where the lights never changed. She was a combat medic. She had joined the military to help people, to save lives. She never thought she would end up here, locked in a small room on a Valari mothership, waiting for whatever came next. The Valari were tall, very tall. Most of them stood 3 meters high. Their bodies were covered in hard shells that looked like crystal. When light hit them, they shimmered in colors that Una had no names for. Their eyes were large and made of many small parts, like the eyes of insects back on Earth. But these eyes held intelligence, cold intelligence. They thought humans were nothing. Primitive creatures from a small planet. Loud, emotional, weak. The Valari had traveled between stars for thousands of years. Humans had only just begun to explore space. To the Valari, humanity was like a child playing with dangerous toys. Una pulled her knees to her chest. The uniform she wore was torn and dirty. She missed Earth. She missed her grandmother's small apartment in Busan. She missed the smell of the sea and the sound of her grandmother's voice singing old songs. Her grandmother had died 3 years ago. But Una still remembered every song she had taught her. On the first night in her cell, Una had heard the screaming. It came from somewhere nearby. Not a human scream. Something else. Higher. Sharper. Full of a fear so deep that it made Una's heart hurt just to hear it. The screaming happened every night. It went on for hours. Sometimes it would stop for a few minutes, and Una would hope it was over. Then, it would start again. Worse than before. The guards never reacted. They stood outside her cell like statues. Their crystal faces showed nothing. On the 5th night, Una asked one of them about it. "What is that sound?" she said. "Is someone hurt?" The guard looked at her with those strange, shimmering eyes. For a long moment, it said nothing. Then it spoke in a voice that sounded like glass breaking slowly. "It is the princess. She dreams." That was all it said. It would not explain more. Una learned from listening. She was good at that. In the quiet hours, she heard the Valari crew talking to each other. Their language was difficult, but she caught words here and there. She learned that her cell was next to something called the Royal Nursery. She learned that the child who screamed was very young and very important, and she learned that the screaming had been going on for a long time. Months, maybe longer. On the 8th night, Una could not take it anymore. The screaming started as it always did. Sharp cries that cut through the walls, the sound of a child in terrible pain. Una covered her ears. But it did not help. She could feel the fear in those cries. It was not physical pain. It was something else. Something in the child's mind. Una stood up. She walked to the wall that separated her cell from the nursery. She pressed her hand against the cold metal. "I am here," she whispered. "You are not alone." The screaming continued. Una closed her eyes. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of warm summer nights on the balcony, looking at the moon. She thought of a song about a rabbit who lived on the moon, pounding rice cakes for the gods. She began to hum. It was soft at first. Just a quiet melody. Her voice was not strong. She was tired and hungry and scared. But she hummed anyway, because she did not know what else to do. The screaming stopped. Una opened her eyes. The silence was so sudden that it felt like the air itself had changed. She waited for the crying to start again. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. Nothing. She kept humming. The melody grew a little stronger. She added words, singing quietly in Korean. The old words her grandmother had sung to her when she was small and afraid of the dark. In the nursery, there was only silence. Una sang until her voice grew tired. Then she sat down on the floor, leaning against the wall, and fell asleep. It was the first peaceful sleep she had since her capture. She did not know what was happening on the other side of that wall. The nursery attendants stood frozen. They were some of the most experienced caretakers in the Valari Dominion. They had tried everything to help the princess. Medicine, psychic shields, ancient rituals. Nothing worked. The child screamed every night until her small body shook with exhaustion. But now she was quiet. Her tiny form lay still in her crystal crib. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was slow and steady. She was sleeping. Actually sleeping. One of the attendants moved closer to the wall. She could hear something on the other side. A strange sound. Rhythmic. Rising and falling. Like waves on a shore. The human was making sounds with her mouth. The attendant did not understand. The Valari did not have music. They did not have songs. They communicated through precise words and psychic connections. The idea of making meaningless sounds for comfort was completely foreign to them. But the result was clear. The princess was at peace. The attendants looked at each other. They did not know what to do with this information. It seemed impossible. It seemed like a mistake. But when they checked the princess again, she was still sleeping. Her vital signs were stable. The nightmare readings that usually filled their screens were quiet. One attendant went to report to her superior. The superior went to report to her superior. By morning, the information had reached the office of the High Healer, and by evening, it had reached the Queen. In her cell, Yuna knew none of this. She only knew that the child had stopped crying. That night, when the screaming did not come, she sang again anyway, just in case, just to be safe. On the other side of the wall, Princess Kira slept through the night for the second time in her short life. In her dreams, there was no pain, no terror, only a sound she had never heard before. A warm sound, a safe sound, a voice. The guards outside Yuna's cell said nothing. But they did not move her to a different location. They did not silence her when she sang. And when she finished each night, one of them would turn off the harsh light in her cell, letting her sleep in gentle darkness. Small kindnesses, unexplained kindnesses. Something had changed. Yuna did not know it yet, but she had done something that the greatest healers in the Valari Dominion could not do. She had given a child peace, and that child was the daughter of a queen. Taeho Shin had been a prisoner for 2 months. He was a commander in the Earth Defense Force, captured during a battle near the outer colonies. Now he worked in the lower decks of the Valari mothership, moving boxes and cleaning floors. It was not the life he had imagined for himself, but Taeho was smart. He watched. He listened. He learned. The Valari thought humans were simple creatures. They spoke freely around their prisoners, believing that humans were too stupid to understand their conversations. This was their mistake. Taeho had spent weeks learning their language. He was not perfect, but he understood enough, and what he understood worried him. The Valari were afraid. Not of humans, not of war. They were afraid of something inside their own ships, something they called the Dreaming Plague. Taeho did not understand it fully at first. The Valari spoke of it in whispers, like a curse they did not want to make real by saying it too loudly. But piece by piece, he put the story together. The Valari were connected. All of them. From the moment they hatched from their eggs, they were part of a great psychic network. They could feel each other's thoughts, share memories, communicate without words. It was the foundation of their civilization. But something had gone wrong. 100 years ago, the Valari had fought a terrible war. Millions had died. The pain of that war had entered the psychic network like poison in water. The adults could protect themselves. Their minds were strong. But the children could not. Every Valari child, from the moment of birth, was exposed to the echoes of that ancient war. They dreamed of death. They dreamed of fire and blood and screaming. They woke every night in terror, their small minds unable to understand or escape the nightmares that came through the network. Many children did not survive. Their minds broke under the weight of so much fear. Those who lived were damaged, haunted, never quite whole. The Valari had tried everything: medicine, technology, psychic shields. Nothing worked. The network was part of them. They could not separate their children from it without killing them, so they watched their children suffer. And they waited, and they prayed to gods they were no longer sure existed. Tejo learned all of this in the dark corners of the ship, listening to guards who thought he could not understand them. It was a heavy knowledge. Even though the Valari were his enemies, he could not help but feel something for them. He knew what it meant to be helpless. He knew what it meant to watch someone you loved suffer. One day, Tejo heard something new. A rumor spreading through the lower decks. Something about the royal nursery. Something about silence. He asked careful questions. He pretended to be curious but stupid. The Valari answered him without thinking, amused by the ignorant human. There was a human woman, they said. A prisoner. She made strange sounds with her mouth. And when she made these sounds, the princess stopped screaming. Tejo knew he had to find this woman. It took him 3 days to arrange a work assignment near her cell. When he finally saw her, she was sitting on the floor, looking tired but calm. She was young, maybe 30 years old. Her uniform marked her as a medic. He waited until the guards were not watching. Then he spoke to her in Korean. His voice low. "My name is Tejo. I heard what you did." The woman looked up at him. Her eyes were cautious, but not afraid. "I am Yuna," she said. "What did you hear?" "That you stopped the princess from screaming. That you made sounds, and she went quiet." Yuna shrugged. "I sang to her. That is all." Tejo stared at her. "Do you understand what that means?" "I understand that a child was crying, and now she is not." "Is there more to understand?" Tejo looked around to make sure they were alone. Then he told her what he had learned. He told her about the dreaming plague. He told her about the children dying. He told her about the 100 years of suffering that the Valari had endured. Yuna listened in silence. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "They do not have songs," she finally said. "Do they?" Tejo shook his head. "No. Music does not exist in their culture. They communicate through thoughts and words. The idea of singing for comfort makes no sense to them. Then what do they do when their children cry?" Tejo's face was sad. "They wait. They hope. They prepare for the worst." Yuna looked at the wall that separated her from the nursery. Somewhere on the other side, a small alien child was sleeping peacefully because of a song Yuna's grandmother had taught her 50 years ago. "That is terrible," Yuna said softly. "That is the most terrible thing I have ever heard." Tejo nodded. "Now you understand why what you did matters. The Valari have never seen anything like it. They do not know what to think. What will they do with me? I do not know, but I think they will want you to keep singing." That night, Yuna did not wait for the screaming to start. As soon as the lights dimmed, she began to sing. She sang every song she could remember. Children's songs, love songs, old folk songs about mountains and rivers and the moon. On the other side of the wall, Princess Kira slept without waking once. The attendants recorded everything. They measured the princess's brain activity. They tracked her vital signs. They noted the exact moments when the human's voice grew louder or softer, and how the child's body responded. The data was clear. Impossible, but clear. The human's voice was doing something that no Valari technology could do. It was creating a barrier between the child and the nightmare network. Not by blocking the connection, but by giving the child something else to focus on. Something warm, something safe. The High Healer reviewed the data personally. She had served the Valari Dominion for 300 years. She had watched thousands of children suffer. She had buried her own children, lost to the dreaming plague, before they could speak their first words. She read the report 3 times. Then she sat in her office and wept. Not from sadness, from hope. For the first time in a century, there was hope. The next morning, She requested an audience with the queen. Back in her cell, Yuna finished her last song of the night. She was tired. Her throat was sore. But she felt something she had not felt since her capture. Purpose. She did not know what the future held. She did not know if the Valari would thank her or use her or throw her away when they were done. But right now, in this moment, she was helping a child. That was enough. She lay down on the cold floor and closed her eyes. In her dreams, she saw her grandmother smiling. The old woman was sitting on the balcony of her apartment, looking at the moon. "You always had a good voice," her grandmother said. "I knew it would be useful someday." Yuna smiled in her sleep. Somewhere in the ship, word was spreading. The human had a gift. The human could stop the nightmares. And soon, the queen would want to see this gift for herself. Queen Velithari had not slept in 3 years. Not truly slept. She rested sometimes, closing her eyes for a few hours, but real sleep would not come. How could she sleep when her daughter screamed through every night? She was old. 400 years old, though she looked no different from when she had taken the throne as a young queen. The Valari did not age as humans did. Their crystal bodies stayed strong for centuries, but their minds grew heavy with time, carrying the weight of all they had seen and lost. Velithari had seen too much. She had lost too many. 12 children. She had given birth to 12 children over the centuries. 8 had died from the dreaming plague before their 2nd year. 3 had survived but were damaged, their minds scarred by the nightmares. They lived, but they were not whole. Kira was her last child. Her final hope. When Kira was born, the healers had delivered bad news. The princess was connected to the nightmare network more deeply than any child they had ever seen. The dreams came to her stronger, faster, more terrible. They predicted she would not survive 6 months. That was 8 months ago. Every night since then, Velithari had listened to her daughter scream. Every night, she had stood outside the nursery, pressing her hand against the door, unable to help. She was the most powerful being in the Dominion. She commanded fleets that could destroy planets. But she could not save her own child. Until now, the report sat on her desk. She had read it 17 times. The words still did not make sense to her. A human prisoner, a combat medic. She made sounds with her mouth, and Kira stopped screaming. Velithari did not understand. The Valari had no concept of music. They communicated through language and thought. The idea of making sounds without meaning, sounds purely for emotional effect, was completely alien to them, but the data was clear. Her daughter had slept through the night. Not once, but 3 nights in a row. Her vital signs were stable. Her brain activity showed no signs of nightmare trauma. It was impossible. It was miraculous. It was terrifying, because if this was real, then everything the Valari believed about humans was wrong. They had dismissed humanity as primitive. Emotional creatures who let their feelings control them. Weak beings who wasted time on things that had no practical purpose. The Valari were logical, efficient, superior. But what if those emotions were not weakness? What if those useless human behaviors were actually something the Valari lacked? Velithari pushed the thought away. She was not ready to consider it. Not yet. First, she needed to see this human for herself. She sent the summons. Yuna was eating her morning meal when the guards came. There were 4 of them. More than usual. They did not speak. They simply opened her cell door and waited. She stood slowly. "Where are we going?" "The Queen wishes to see you," one guard said. Yuna's heart began to beat faster. She had heard about the Queen. Everyone had. Velithari was legendary. She had ruled the Dominion for 3 centuries. She had won wars, crushed rebellions, built an empire that spanned 1,000 star systems, and now she wanted to see Yuna. The walk through the ship was long. Yuna tried to remember the turns, the hallways, the doors, but everything looked the same. Endless corridors of smooth metal, lit by soft lights that never flickered. No windows, no decorations. Nothing to mark one place as different from another. Finally, they reached a door larger than the others. It was made of something that looked like gold, but shimmered with inner light. Two guards stood on either side, their crystal bodies still as statues. The door opened. The throne room was vast. Yuna had never seen a space so large inside a ship. The ceiling rose higher than she could measure. The floor was polished to a mirror shine. And at the far end, on a throne carved from a single piece of crystal, sat the queen. Velithari was beautiful. That was the first thing Yuna thought. Beautiful and terrifying. She was tall, even for a Velari. Her body was covered in crystal that shifted colors as she moved, like oil on water. Her eyes were huge, made of thousands of tiny facets that caught the light and threw it back in patterns that hurt to look at. Yuna walked forward. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. When she was 10 meters from the throne, she stopped. She did not know if she should bow. She did not know the customs, so she simply stood and waited. The queen studied her for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was like music itself, though she did not know it. Deep and resonant, filling the room without effort. You are the human who sings to my daughter. It was not a question. Yuna answered anyway. Yes, your majesty. Explain yourself. What sorcery have you worked upon my child? Yuna took a breath. She was scared. She could not deny that. But she had faced fear before. She had worked in battlefield hospitals while bombs fell around her. She had held dying soldiers in her arms and told them everything would be okay. She knew how to be brave when she needed to be. No sorcery, your majesty, she said. I just sang to her. Impossible. The queen leaned forward. Our children are connected to the psychic chorus. No external sound can reach them. Their minds are trapped in the network. Nothing we have tried can break through. Yuna thought about this. She thought about what Tejo had told her. She thought about the child crying in the dark. Alone. In a nightmare she could not escape. Maybe, she said slowly. I was not trying to reach her mind. The queen's eyes flickered. What do you mean? I do not know much about your psychic network. I cannot see it or feel it. I only know what I heard. A child was crying. She was scared. So I did what my grandmother did for me when I was scared. I sang to her. That makes no sense. If you cannot reach her mind, how can your voice help her? Yuna shook her head. I do not know, your majesty. I am not a scientist. I am just a medic. But I know that when I was small and had bad dreams, my grandmother would sing to me. Her voice did not stop the dreams, but it made me feel less alone. It made me feel safe. She paused. Maybe that is what your daughter needed. Not someone to fix her mind. Just someone to be there. To let her know she was not alone in the dark. The queen sat very still. Her crystal body did not move. Her eyes did not blink. But something changed in her. A slight shift in the way she held herself. A softening that was barely visible but unmistakably real. You speak of emotions, the queen said. Comfort. Safety. These are human concepts. And to grow. And to grow. Kansaja. And to grow. They are universal concepts, Yuna replied. Every child needs to feel safe. Every child needs to know someone cares about them. It does not matter if that child is human or Velari. Fear is fear. Loneliness is loneliness. And sometimes, a voice in the darkness is enough to make them bearable. Silence filled the throne room. Yuna did not know if she had said the right thing. She did not know if the queen would be angry or pleased or something else entirely. She only knew that she had spoken the truth. Finally, the queen spoke. You will be tested. My healers will observe you with my daughter. They will measure everything. They will determine if what you say is true. Yuna nodded. If this is a trick, if you have deceived me in any way, your death will be slow and painful. I understand that too. The queen looked at her for another long moment. Then, she did something unexpected. She nodded. A small gesture. Barely noticeable. You are brave, human. I will give you that much. Now go. The test will begin tonight. The guards led Yuna away. As she walked back through the endless corridors, she felt the weight of what had just happened settle onto her shoulders. She had spoken to a queen. She had promised something she did not fully understand. And tonight, she would have to prove that a simple song could do what centuries of Velari technology could not. She thought of her grandmother again. She hoped she was watching from somewhere. She hoped she was proud, because Yuna was going to need all the help she could get. The royal nursery was nothing like Yuna had imagined. She had expected something cold and medical, like a hospital room. Instead, she found a space filled with soft lights that shifted through gentle colors. The walls were curved, smooth, almost organic. In the center of the room stood a crib made of crystal that glowed from within. And in that crib lay Princess Kira. She was small. So small that Yuna felt her heart ache just looking at her. The princess was shaped differently from human babies, her body covered in soft crystal that had not yet hardened. Her eyes were large and dark, not yet showing the 1,000 facets of an adult Velari. She looked fragile, vulnerable, alone. Around the room stood dozens of Velari, scientists in white robes, healers with instruments Yuna did not recognize, guards with weapons at their sides. And in the corner, watching everything with ancient eyes, stood the High Healer. Yuna had been told about the High Healer. Her name was Vethany. She had served the Dominion for 300 years. She had watched generations of children die. Some said she had gone mad from grief. Others said she was the sanest person in the Empire, because she had accepted what others refused to believe. The Velari were dying. Slowly, painfully, one child at a time, and nothing could stop it. Until perhaps now. Jinho Baek stood near the door, looking uncomfortable. He was a xenobiologist, a scientist who had studied alien life before the war. Now he was a prisoner. Like Yuna. Like Teho. But the Velari had brought him here to help translate their instruments, to explain what the human might be doing in terms they could understand. He caught Yuna's eye and gave her a small nod. It was not much, but it helped. You will sit here, one of the scientists said, pointing to a chair beside the crib. You will do whatever it is you do. We will observe. Yuna walked to the chair and sat down. She could feel the weight of all those eyes on her, judging her, doubting her, waiting for her to fail. She looked at Kira. The princess was awake, her dark eyes staring at nothing. Her small body trembled slightly. The first signs of what was coming. Soon the nightmares would start. Soon she would begin to scream. The nightmare phase is beginning, announced one of the healers, reading from an instrument. Brain activity increasing. Stress hormones rising. We estimate 3 minutes until full onset. Yuna took a deep breath. She thought about all the times she had sat beside dying soldiers, holding their hands, telling them stories to distract them from the pain. This was not so different. A child was suffering. She had a chance to help. That was all that mattered. She reached out and gently touched the edge of the crib. She did not touch Kira directly. She did not know if that was allowed. But she wanted to be close. She wanted the child to know she was there. 2 minutes until onset, the healer said. Yuna closed her eyes. She thought of her grandmother's apartment, the small balcony where they would sit on summer nights, the moon hanging low over the ocean, the smell of salt and flowers. She began to sing. It was the same song as always. The song about the rabbit on the moon. Her voice was soft, barely louder than a whisper. But in the silent nursery, it carried. The Velari scientists looked at each other. They had never heard anything like this. The sounds coming from the human's mouth were not words. Not in any language they recognized, but there was a pattern to them. A rhythm. A shape that rose and fell like breathing. 1 minute until onset, the healer said. Brain activity still increasing. Stress hormones still rising. Yuna kept singing. She did not look at the instruments. She did not look at the scientists. She looked only at Kira. The princess's eyes had moved. They were focused now. Looking at Yuna. Looking at the source of this strange new sound. 30 seconds until onset. Yuna's voice grew a little stronger. She added words now. The Korean lyrics she had learned as a child. Words about a rabbit pounding rice cakes. About the moon goddess smiling down at the world. About the beauty of night when all was peaceful. 15 seconds. Kira's trembling slowed. 10 seconds. The princess's eyes grew heavy. Her body relaxed. 5 seconds. Kira's eyes closed. Onset should be. Now. Nothing happened. The healers stared at their instruments. The brain activity readings had stopped climbing. The stress hormones had leveled off. Instead of the sharp spike that marked the beginning of a nightmare, there was a gentle curve downward. This is not possible, one scientist whispered. Yuna kept singing. She did not stop. She did not know what would happen if she stopped. So she continued, letting the melody flow from her as naturally as breathing. Minutes passed. Kira did not wake. She did not cry. She did not scream. She lay in her crystal crib, perfectly still, perfectly peaceful. The nightmare phase has been skipped, a healer announced, her voice shaking. The princess has entered normal sleep. I repeat, normal sleep. No nightmare activity detected. The room erupted in quiet chaos. Scientists spoke rapidly to each other. Healers checked and rechecked their instruments. Guards looked confused, uncertain what they were witnessing. Jinho stepped forward, studying the readings on the nearest screen. His eyes went wide. It is working, he said. Look at this. The human's voice is creating a pattern in the air. Sound waves. Vibrations. The Valari psychic network cannot interpret these vibrations. To Kira's mind, the singing is like static. It blocks the nightmare signals. It gives her something else to focus on. He turned to the high healer. It is not magic. It is not sorcery. It is simply a frequency that your network cannot process. The princess's brain is using it as a shield. The high healer moved closer to the crib. She looked down at Kira, at this child who had been dying slowly for 8 months. The princess's face was calm. Her breathing was steady. She was dreaming. But they were her own dreams. Not the inherited nightmares of an ancient war. Vethani fell to her knees. She had knelt before queens and emperors. She had never knelt before a human. But now, in this moment, she did not care about pride or protocol. She cared only about what she was seeing, a child sleeping peacefully, a child who might live. How long can you continue? She asked Yuna. Yuna's voice was growing tired. Her throat was dry. But she answered without stopping her song. As long as she needs me. Vethani bowed her head. Then please, do not stop. Yuna sang for 3 more hours that night. When her voice finally gave out, another human was brought in. A soldier named Minho, who had been a music teacher before the war. He did not sing as well as Yuna, but he knew dozens of songs. He sang lullabies and folk songs and even popular songs from Earth radio. Kira slept through it all. When morning came, the experiment was over. The results were clear. Human voices could protect Valari children from the dreaming plague. Not by curing them, not by breaking their connection to the network, but by giving them something else. A sound they could hold on to. A light in the darkness. The high healer submitted her report to the queen before noon. In her quarters, Yuna slept for 14 hours straight. She dreamed of her grandmother, sitting on the balcony, smiling. I always knew, her grandmother said in the dream. I always knew your voice was special. When Yuna woke, everything had changed. She was no longer a prisoner. She was something else entirely. Something the Valari had no name for yet. But they would learn. In time, they would learn exactly what humanity had to offer. And it would change their civilization forever. 3 weeks had passed since the experiment. Yuna no longer slept in a cell. She had been given quarters near the royal nursery. Real quarters, with a soft bed, clean clothes, and food that actually tasted good. She could walk freely through certain parts of the ship. Guards still followed her, but they kept their distance, and sometimes she caught them looking at her with something that might have been respect. Other humans had been tested. Not all of them could do what Yuna did. Some had voices that were too harsh, too loud. Others could not find the right rhythm, but many could. Soldiers who had sung in church choirs. Scientists who had played instruments as children. Workers who remembered lullabies from their parents. The Valari called it the Human Protocol. A program to identify human prisoners who could help their children. It was not a cure for the dreaming plague. The nightmares still existed. The network was still poisoned. But for the first time in a century, Valari children were surviving their first years. The news had spread across the fleet. Ships that had been sent to war were now requesting human prisoners. Not to work, not to serve, to sing. Tejo had become something like an administrator. He worked with the Valari to organize the program, to match humans with children, to keep records of what worked and what did not. He was still a prisoner in name, but in practice, he was a partner, an ally in an impossible project. Jinho studied the science behind it all. Why did some voices work better than others? What frequencies were most effective? Could machines replicate the effect? The answer to the last question was no. Machines could produce the same sounds, but the children did not respond. There was something about a living voice, something about the intention behind it, that could not be copied. The Valari did not understand this. They were a logical species. They believed everything could be explained, measured, reproduced. The idea that there was something in a human voice that could not be quantified bothered them deeply, but they accepted it. Because the alternative was watching more children die. Yuna spent most of her time with Kira. The princess had grown stronger. She was eating well, sleeping well, beginning to explore her world. She had started to make sounds of her own. The Valari equivalent of babbling. The healers said she was developing faster than any plagued child they had ever seen. Yuna loved her. She knew it was strange to love an alien child, a princess of a species that had captured her and held her prisoner. But love did not care about such things. Kira was small and sweet, and looked at Yuna with eyes full of trust. How could she not love her? One evening, Yuna sat beside Kira's crib, singing softly. The princess was awake but calm, watching Yuna with those large dark eyes. Her small hands moved in the air, reaching for something invisible. Yuna finished her song and smiled at the child. Did you like that one? It is about a tiger who lives in the mountains. Very fierce, very strong. Kira made a small sound. Not a cry, something else. A sound that rose and fell, almost like it was trying to follow the melody Yuna had just sung. Yuna's breath caught. Kira made the sound again. It was clumsy, off-key, barely recognizable, but it was unmistakably an attempt to copy what she had heard. Yuna laughed. She reached into the crib and gently touched Kira's hand. The princess wrapped her tiny fingers around Yuna's finger and held on tight. They stayed like that for a long time. Human and Valari, prisoner and princess. Two beings from different worlds, connected by something that had no name. Days passed. Kira continued to grow. She began to recognize faces, to respond to voices. The healers were amazed. They had never seen a plague child develop so normally. Some whispered that she might be the first child in a century to reach adulthood without permanent damage. One night, something remarkable happened. Yuna was singing her usual lullaby when Kira suddenly sat up. Her eyes were bright, focused, alive with an intelligence that had not been there before. She looked at Yuna with an intensity that made the human woman stop singing. "Kira, what is wrong?" The princess opened her mouth, and she spoke. "Your voice," she said. The words were broken, hesitant, spoken in Galactic Common with a heavy accent. But they were words, real words. "Your voice stops my nightmares." Yuna could not breathe. She stared at the child, unable to believe what she had just heard. "What did you say?" Kira tilted her head, as if considering the question. Then she spoke again, more clearly this time. "Your voice. It stops the bad dreams. I hear you, and the dark goes away. I am not scared anymore." Yuna felt tears rolling down her cheeks. She did not try to stop them. She did not care that the guards were watching, that the healers would hear about this, that the news would spread across the ship. All she cared about was this moment, this child, these words. She reached into the crib and lifted Kira gently. The princess was light, her body still soft and fragile. Yuna held her close, cradling her against her chest. "Then I will keep singing," she whispered. "For as long as you need me, for as long as you want me here, I will keep singing." Kira made a sound that might have been a laugh. She pressed her face against Yuna's shoulder and closed her eyes. "Stay," she said. "Please stay. I will stay. I promise." The healers recorded everything. The princess's first words, the emotional exchange, the unprecedented bond between human and Velari child. They sent the recording to the High Healer, who sent it to the Queen. Velithari watched the video 17 times. She saw her daughter speak. Her daughter, who should have been dead by now. Her daughter, who should have been lost to the nightmares like so many before her. Her daughter was alive and speaking and asking a human to stay with her. The Queen sat alone in her chamber for a long time after watching the video. She thought about everything she had believed about humans. She thought about everything she had been taught about other species. She thought about the war that had started because the Velari believed they were superior to all others. And she wondered if they had been wrong about everything. In the nursery, Yuna rocked Kira gently and sang another song. This one was about the ocean, about waves that came and went like breathing, about the peace of floating on water under a sky full of stars. Kira listened, and for the first time in her short life, she dreamed of beautiful things, not of war, not of death, not of the ancient horror that had poisoned her people for 100 years. She dreamed of a voice, a warm voice that loved her, a voice that made her feel safe, and in that dream, she was not alone. She would never be alone again. Queen Velithari had ruled for 400 years. In that time, she had done things that would horrify most beings. She had ordered the destruction of planets that refused to submit to the Dominion. She had watched millions die in wars she had started. She had made decisions that cost lives beyond counting, all in the name of her people's survival. She had never apologized. She had never shown weakness. A queen could not afford such things. The moment she appeared vulnerable, enemies would circle like predators smelling blood. But tonight, alone in her private chamber, she allowed herself to feel. She watched the recording again. Her daughter's voice, speaking words for the first time. "Your voice stops my nightmares." Such simple words. Such impossible words. Velithari remembered the night Kira was born. The joy she had felt, holding her newborn child. The terror that had followed when the healers delivered their diagnosis. The months of watching her daughter suffer, knowing there was nothing she could do. She had prepared herself for Kira's death. She had written the funeral rites. She had chosen the burial site. She had hardened her heart, telling herself it was better to accept the inevitable than to hope for the impossible. And then a human had started singing. A human. A member of a species the Velari had dismissed as primitive. A creature from a planet so small, it barely registered on their star maps. A prisoner of war with no power. no status, no value in the eyes of the Dominion. This human had done what the greatest healers in the galaxy could not. She had given Kira a chance to live. Velithari stood and walked to her window. Outside, stars burned in the endless dark. Somewhere out there was Earth, the human homeworld. She had never thought about it before. It had never seemed important. Now she wondered what it was like. What kind of world produced beings who sang to comfort children? What kind of culture taught its people to offer warmth to strangers? The Velari did not have these things. They had strength. They had technology. They had logic and efficiency and power. But they did not have lullabies. She made a decision. She would go to the nursery. She would see her daughter. She would meet this human who had changed everything. The walk through the ship was quiet. At this hour, most of the crew was resting. Guards stood at attention as she passed, but she barely noticed them. Her mind was focused on what lay ahead. When she reached the nursery, she paused outside the door. She could hear something through the metal. A sound, rising and falling in a pattern she did not recognize. Singing. The human was singing. Velithari opened the door. The nursery was dim, lit only by the soft glow of Kira's crib. Yuna sat in a chair beside it, holding the princess in her arms. She was singing quietly, her eyes closed, lost in the melody. Kira was asleep. Truly asleep. Her small body was relaxed, her breathing steady. Her face showed no signs of distress. She looked peaceful. She looked safe. Velithari stood in the doorway, unable to move. She had seen her daughter scream in terror countless times. She had watched healers try everything to calm her, only to fail again and again. She had never seen this. She had never seen her daughter at peace. Yuna opened her eyes and saw the queen. She started to stand, to bow, to show proper respect. But Kira was in her arms, sleeping soundly, and she did not want to disturb her. "Your Majesty," she said quietly. "I did not expect you." Velithari said nothing. She walked slowly across the room, her crystal body moving silently. She stopped beside the chair and looked down at her daughter. Kira's eyes were closed. Her tiny hands were curled against her chest. She was dreaming, but whatever she saw in those dreams made her smile. Something broke inside the queen. It was not a dramatic moment. There was no sound, no visible change, but something that had been held together by will and duty and centuries of practice suddenly could not hold anymore. Her legs gave way. The guards at the door moved to catch her, but she raised a hand to stop them. She did not want help. She did not want witnesses. She wanted only to kneel here, beside her daughter, and feel what she had not allowed herself to feel for so long. Relief, gratitude, hope. Yuna watched the queen kneel. She did not know what to say. She did not know if she should speak at all, so she simply sat there, holding Kira, and waited. Velithari spoke. Her voice, usually so commanding, was barely a whisper. "I have spent a century watching my people's children die. I have consulted every healer, every scientist, every mystic in the known galaxy. I have offered treasures beyond counting for a cure. I have prayed to gods I do not believe in." She paused. Her crystal body trembled slightly. None could help. None could save them. My own children, dead before they could speak. My daughter, dying slowly in front of me. And I could do nothing. I, who have destroyed empires, could not save one child. She looked up at Yuna. Her eyes, those vast compound eyes that had seen the birth and death of stars, were wet. And then you came. A prisoner. A human. A species we thought was worthless. You sat in a cell, and you sang. And my daughter stopped screaming. Yuna felt her own eyes filling with tears. "Your Majesty, I did not do anything special. I just tried to help." "No." The queen's voice was firm now, stronger. "You did something we could not understand. Something we had lost long ago. or perhaps never had. You showed us that there are powers in the universe that cannot be measured. She reached out and touched Kira's face gently. The princess stirred slightly, but did not wake. You gave my daughter warmth, safety, comfort. These are words we know, but we did not truly understand them. We are cold beings, we Valari. We have crystal bodies and logical minds. We thought these things made us strong. She shook her head slowly. We were wrong. We were so wrong. Yuna did not know what to say. She looked at this ancient queen, this ruler of 1,000 worlds, kneeling on the floor like a child seeking comfort. Your Majesty, she said finally. It is not too late to learn. Velithari looked at her. What do you mean? Warmth is not something you are born with. It is something you choose. Every day, every moment, you can choose to be kind, to be gentle, to offer comfort to those who need it. It is never too late to start. The queen considered this. She thought about her centuries of rule, the wars, the conquests, the endless pursuit of power, and she thought about her daughter, sleeping peacefully in the arms of a human who had chosen to be kind. Will you teach us? She asked. Will you show us how? Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, gentle and genuine. I will try, but you have to want to learn. You have to be willing to change. Velithari looked at Kira again. She thought about the future. A future where her daughter might live. A future where Valari children might grow up without nightmares. A future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. I am willing, she said. For her, I am willing to do anything. She reached out and touched Yuna's hand. The human's skin was warm against her cool crystal. It felt strange, foreign, but also, somehow, right. Thank you, the queen said. Thank you for saving my daughter. Yuna squeezed her hand gently. She saved herself. I just gave her something to hold on to. They stayed like that for a long time. A queen and a prisoner. An alien and a human. Two beings from different worlds, learning together what it meant to hope, and in her arms, Kira slept on, dreaming of songs and moonlight and a voice that would never leave her. The war ended on a Tuesday. Not with a final battle. Not with surrender. Not with victory parades. It ended with a document signed in a room that smelled of flowers, because Yuna had suggested the Valari try adding plants to their ship. The treaty was unlike anything either species had seen before. It was not a treaty of conquest or submission. It was not about territories or resources. It was a treaty of need. The Valari Dominion formally requested human volunteers. Not soldiers. Not workers. Singers. Caregivers. Storytellers. People who could reach the children. The psychic network had abandoned. In return, the Valari offered things that humanity had only dreamed of. Advanced technology that could cure diseases. Star maps that opened the galaxy for exploration. Protection from other species who might see humans as easy targets. But more than that, they offered something harder to define. Respect. Recognition. A place at the table of galactic civilization. The humans who had been prisoners became something else. Ambassadors, some called them. Teachers, said others. The Valari had their own word for them, one that had not existed in their language until now. Singers of peace. Tejo was offered a position in the new joint government. He accepted, knowing that the work ahead would be difficult. Two species, who had been at war, learning to trust each other. Old wounds that would take generations to heal. Misunderstandings that could spark new conflicts. But he also knew that it was possible. He had seen it happen in the nurseries, where human voices calmed alien children. If that was possible, anything was. Jinho continued his research. He studied the connection between human voices and the Valari psychic network. He worked with Valari scientists, sharing knowledge, learning from each other. They published papers together, attended conferences together, became friends. Science, Jinho discovered, was a language that both species could speak. Across the galaxy, the human protocol expanded. Ships that had once carried weapons now carried volunteers. Young people who wanted to make a difference. Elderly folks who remembered old songs. Parents who knew how to comfort crying children. Not all of them stayed. The work was hard, the environment strange, the cultural differences vast. Some went home after a few months, unable to adapt. But others stayed for years. They learned the Valari language. They made friends. They fell in love. A new generation began to emerge. Children who had been saved by human voices grew up knowing both cultures. They spoke both languages. They understood both ways of thinking. They became bridges between worlds. Kira was the first of them. The princess grew strong and healthy. Her mind was sharp, her spirit bright. She had none of the damage that had afflicted plague children before her. The healers said it was a miracle. Yuna said it was just love. As Kira grew, she began to learn to sing herself. Her voice was different from a human voice, higher and stranger, but she could carry a melody. She sang the songs Yuna had taught her. She sang new songs she made up on her own. She sang for other children. Young Valari, who had been saved by human voices and were now learning to find their own. The first time she sang a younger child to sleep, Kira cried with joy. She understood, finally, what Yuna had given her. Not just peace, not just safety, a purpose, a way to give back what she had received. Queen Velithari watched her daughter grow with something she had not felt in centuries. Pride. Not the cold pride of conquest. The warm pride of a mother seeing her child become something wonderful. She had changed too. The queen, who had destroyed planets, now spent her days building schools where humans and Valari could learn together. Hospitals where the best of both species' medicine combined. Cultural centers where music, that strange human invention, was taught and celebrated. Some Valari resisted. They called it weakness, this embrace of human emotion. They said the queen had been corrupted, that she was betraying everything the Dominion stood for. A few even tried to rebel, but the children disagreed. The generation that had been saved by human voices, they knew the truth. They knew that strength did not mean coldness, that logic did not require cruelty. That power could be used to nurture as well as destroy. They were the future. And the future they wanted was one of connection, not isolation. Yuna was given a choice. She could return to Earth as a hero. Parades would be held in her honor. Books would be written about her. She would live out her days in comfort, celebrated for what she had done, or she could stay. She stood in her quarters, looking at the small package of her belongings. Not much to show for her years in space. Some clothes. A few books. A recording of her grandmother's voice, the only thing she had asked for from Earth. Kira found her there. The princess was 10 years old now, tall for her age, her crystal body beginning to show the colors of adulthood. She stood in the doorway, watching Yuna. "Are you leaving?" she asked. Yuna looked at her. This child she had sung to, in the darkness. This child who had spoken her first words to her. This child who called her aunt, and meant it. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I have not decided." Kira walked into the room. She stood beside Yuna and looked at the small pile of belongings. "I want you to stay," she said, "but I will understand if you go. Earth is your home." Yuna shook her head. "Earth was my home. I am not sure it still is." "What do you mean?" Yuna sat down on the bed. Kira sat beside her, close enough to touch. "When I was captured, I thought my life was over. I thought I would die here, far from everything I loved. But then I heard you crying, and I started singing, and everything changed." She smiled. "I found a purpose here. I found family. I found something I did not know I was looking for." Kira leaned against her. "Then stay. Please. We need you. Others can sing." You have learned to sing yourself. It is not about singing. It is about you. You are part of us now. Part of our story. How can you leave? Yuna put her arm around Kira. She thought about her grandmother, who had taught her to sing. She thought about her parents, long gone. She thought about Earth, blue and green and so very far away. And she thought about this strange crystal ship, floating among the stars. About the children she had helped save. About the queen who had become her friend. About Taeho and Jinho, and all the others who had built something new from the ruins of war. Someone has to teach them the words to the songs, she said finally. The old songs. The ones my grandmother taught me. The ones that have been passed down for generations. She looked at Kira. If I leave, who will teach them? Kira's eyes brightened. Does that mean you are staying? Yuna smiled. It was the same smile she had given Kira on that first night, when she had promised to keep singing. Yes, I am staying. Kira threw her arms around Yuna. Her crystal body was cool, but her embrace was warm. She held on tight, the way she had held on to Yuna's voice in the darkness so many years ago. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for everything. Yuna held her back. They stayed like that for a long time. Human and Valari, two species that should have been enemies. Bound together by something stronger than war. Outside the window, stars burned in the endless dark. Somewhere among them was Earth. Somewhere among them was the future that humans and Valari would build together. A future of songs and warmth and children who were not afraid to dream. A future that had started with a voice in the darkness, saying the simplest thing in the universe, you are not alone. And across the galaxy, that message spread. From ship to ship, planet to planet, star to star, the humans had come. And they had brought something the galaxy had never seen before. Not weapons, not conquest. Music, and with it, hope. The story did not end there, of course. Stories never really end. They just become part of larger stories, weaving together into something too big to see. But if you asked Yuna what she remembered most, she would not talk about treaties or technology or the changing of civilizations. She would talk about a little girl in a crystal crib, opening her eyes for the first time, without fear. She would talk about a voice in the darkness, singing an old song about a rabbit on the moon. She would talk about the moment when everything changed, not with a battle, but with a lullaby. And she would smile, because some things are worth more than empires. Some things are worth everything. Love is one of them, and love, like a song, goes on forever.